I grew up feeling like a ghost in my own home, drifting through the halls of Brinkwood like a whisper, unnoticed and unwelcomed. I can still picture the way the light would filter through the dusty curtains in the living room, illuminating the family photos that lined the walls, photos of my sibling grinning, surrounded by gifts and laughter while I stood to the side, a shadow among the celebration. There was a year when they even forgot about my birthday, an oversight buried beneath the avalanche of my siblings' charms and accomplishments. I remember standing in the kitchen, a small cake with a single candle tucked away in the corner while my sibling laughed and tore open present after present. Sometimes I convinced myself that the universe had simply misplaced my worth in all the chaos. Every holiday felt like a cruel reminder of my status as the overlooked one. They would gather around the perfectly decorated tree, my sibling gleaming under the glow of strings of lights as I stood on the outskirts, clutching my less than magnificent gifts, a hastily wrapped book on basic gardening, a set of old paintbrushes that had seen better days. Maybe next time, Isabella, my mother would say with that distant, rehearsed smile, the kind that made my heart thrash wildly in my chest. My father would pat my shoulder, the touch comforting yet hollow, as if he understood the ache of feeling invisible but could do nothing to soothe it. It was a routine that played on repeat, leaving me with a heart full of longing and a mind churning with self-doubt. The hollow ache in my chest became part of my everyday life as I watched from the sidelines, a spectator to the love my family poured over my sibling. Instead of affection, I was given lessons in patience and perseverance. My accomplishments compared unfavorably to theirs, my dreams dimmed like the fading light of a setting sun. The turning point came unexpectedly, like a thunderstorm rolling in on a sunny day when our grandfather passed away. He was the one who whispered secrets of affection when no one else would, his gentle old voice the only reminder that perhaps I mattered. I remember the way his frail hands would grasp mine, his eyes sparkling with warmth and laughter, telling me stories that embraced my spirit far more than my family ever had. The world felt safe in his presence, and I believed I would always find a haven there, so when he died, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. It still stung, the memories of my grandfather's kind eyes fading into the background, replaced with the harsh realization that my family was shrouding me in secrecy. I waited eagerly for the will reading, dreaming that it would be the moment they recognized my worth, the moment they would finally see me, Isabella Bennett, the neglected child who had grown weary under the weight of comparison and neglect. Sitting in that cold, sterile room, I clenched my hands in my lap, the air thick with tension. My siblings' fingers drummed impatiently on the table, their expression a canvas of smugness. I could barely breathe, anticipation twisting my insides like a vice. My heart raced as the lawyer cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the silence. "We are here today to discuss the estate of Mr. Bennett," he began, his voice mechanical, stripping the moment of any warmth it once held. "Here we go," my sibling whispered, their smirk unfurling like a flag of victory. I shot them a glance, my entire body tensing with fury, but I bit my tongue. How could they be so gleeful? This was not a celebration, it was a funeral for the love I had lost. The lawyer continued, reading the words that would rewrite my life. "Mr. Bennett has left behind a sizable estate, and it is important to honor his wishes." Something twisted in my stomach as he read the names. "To my dear grandchild," he started, and I leaned forward, my heart pounding. "I leave my entire estate worth over $500,000. My breath hitched in my throat, and my sibling practically bounced in their seat the way they leaned forward, transfixed. "I leave this to you." Their smirk widened, eyes gleaming with triumph. I felt a wild, frantic whirl of emotions, shock, rage, heartbreak, all crashing in like waves, relentless and unforgiving. I couldn't breathe. "What?" I whispered under my breath, the word hanging heavy in the air. The lawyer's voice faded into the background as my world flipped upside down. My family erupted in a round of laughter, joyous and bright, mingling with their disbelief. I glanced around the room, my eyes landing on my mother's smug smile and my father's approving nod, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "You should have tried harder to earn your place," my mother said, voice dripping with that familiar condescension, reminding me of every time I had been overlooked, discarded like yesterday's news. "This is the consequence of being distant." I felt the ground vanish beneath my feet. All those times I tried, all those sacrifices, they meant nothing. I practically spat, the words hurt as they left my mouth raw with heartache, but I couldn't hold back. "How could you?" Their eyes flickered with something like annoyance but quickly hardened into dismissal. "You should have known better," she replied, her tone so sharp it could cut glass. "It was not a secret." The room grew smaller, suffocating. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but what good would it do? I turned to my sibling, who wore that self-satisfied grin like a crown. "You planned this, didn't you?" "You always knew," I accused, bitterness coursing through me like poison. They shrugged, posture relaxed as if I were simply being dramatic. "Honestly, Isabella, you could have fought for your share. Just because you chose to be a ghost in this family doesn't mean we should feel sorry for you. You've always been too quiet." "Too quiet?" I echoed, incredulous. "You don't even understand. I had to learn to be invisible to survive in this house. You stole my place, and you're so proud of it." The warmth of betrayal seeped into my bones, filling the gaps where love once resided. "You think you deserve this because you've always taken while I've given, and what have I got in return? Nothing. I'm empty. I was hoping." "Hoping for what?" my sibling interrupted, their voice rising, irritated. "To get something you didn't earn. It's your fault. You should have fought harder, Isabella. You've always been too passive." Their words twisted the knife deeper, and my heart cracked under the weight of their conviction. What about family? I managed to reply, though my voice trembled, thick with unspent tears. With a final flourish, they launched the ultimate betrayal. Family, you don't get love for free, you earn it. My father leaned forward, arms crossed, a mask of disdain stretched across his features. This is just a reminder that you should step up, Isabella. We can only give you so much. I stared at him, disbelief pouring into my veins like ice cold water. How could they be so blind to their own cruelty? How could they defend what was happening? Their resolute dismissal sliced through my heart, leaving jagged edges and raw wounds that would never heal. Turning away, I glanced at the door, the way the sunlight streamed in, warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the coldness that draped over our family like a heavy mist. Could I really leave them behind? Would anyone even miss me? Would they notice if I slipped away, ghosting right out of their lives as I had so often done before? I felt the anger boil inside me, overwhelming and powerful. It pushed me forward, making me stand tall, regaining a shred of that invisible strength I had buried all my life. I never thought I would arrive here at this precipice, facing a lifetime of neglect and betrayal. A sudden thought materialized in my mind, electrifying and fierce. I would prove my worth not through their approval, but through my own salvation. This was not the end. I felt the fire ignite in my veins, no more being a ghost. If my family wanted a shadow, then they would find only darkness where the light once shined. Keep your money, I finally said, voice steady. I turned and walked towards the door, feeling the warmth of freedom creeping back in. I'll build my own legacy. Each step I took echoed in my heart, a sound of rebirth, even as betrayal and sorrow lingered in the past behind me, always threatening to pull me back into the shadows. But I refused. I was done being overlooked. In that moment, I understood. Revenge doesn't come from money, it comes from reclaiming oneself. I spent another restless night tossing and turning, my mind racing with thoughts of that forgotten fortune. Shadows danced across the walls of my room as moonlight filtered through the thin curtains, casting eerie shapes that seemed to mock me. I could still hear their joyous laughter, a sound that once brought warmth but now echoed in my mind like a haunting melody, prickling my skin and dredging up pain I thought I had buried. They had everything: the flashy cars, the designer clothes, the friends who surrounded them like moths to a flame. But what did I have? Nothing but a pile of bills and an ever-growing sense of loneliness gnawing at my insides. I rubbed my eyes, trying to dispel the heavy fog of despair clinging to me. Memories of family gatherings invaded my mind uninvited, particularly those moments when I would catch their glances, pitiless and condescending. "Oh, Isabella, you haven't gotten around to finding a real job yet," one of them had said, principles of kindness twisted into taunts. I had wanted to scream, to tell them that I was doing my best, that the weight of their frivolous wealth felt like cement dragging me down, making it impossible to rise to the surface and breathe. Each encounter was a reminder of my betrayal, of fires I'd put out only for them to reignite with evocation of my insignificance. In a moment of desperation, I had confronted my parents about the hidden fortune. I was standing there in the living room, the faded wallpaper peeling around us, my voice shaking with urgency. "Mom, Dad, I need to know why they received everything while I am left with nothing." Their dismissive laughter still screeched in my ears. "You're being dramatic, Isabella, it's not that simple." My mother's voice, laced with irritation, cut through me like a knife. I had never intended to be dramatic. "Isabella, you know how it goes, right?" My sibling's voice dripped with insincerity, as sweet and cool as poison. "You just didn't earn it like we did." I had wanted to throw their words back at them, to poke holes in their inflated egos, to remind them that I once held dreams of my own. But I was outnumbered and outmatched, my voice drowned out by their cacophony of privilege, how they reveled in their extravagance, parading their wealth like trophies while I was suffocating under a blanket of despair. After yet another holiday dinner filled with their self-congratulatory laughter, I found myself back in my room, the dark corners of my mind spiraling deeper into frustrations. I had always aspired to greatness, but how could I dream when I was constantly reminded of how small I was? How could I reclaim what was rightfully mine when my family treated me as if I were invisible, even interchangeable? But one fateful day, fate turned a corner for me. I had taken to rummaging through our grandfather's attic, a place most people dreaded going. It was cluttered with cobwebs, old boxes sagging under the weight of time, and dust particles dancing in the light like little ethereal beings. The air smelled musty and stale, mixed with whispered memories of a life long gone. I had initially intended to find something mundane, perhaps an old book or a forgotten toy, but what I stumbled across changed everything. In the farthest corner of the attic, beneath a tattered quilt, I found a dusty wooden box, its surface marred with scratches, holding secrets like its contents, letters and documents yellowed with age. My heart pounded in my chest as I carefully lifted the box, feeling like I was unearthing buried treasure. I could feel the weight of the secrets it held pressing against my palms. I set it down on a nearby chair, heart racing with anticipation. Each letter I opened sent a shiver down my spine. They fluttered between my fingers like trapped birds, desperate to escape. But it was the final letter that held my breath hostage. My grandfather's neat, careful handwriting traced the lines of his last wishes, a dedication to fairness, to equity. It was a testament to his belief that love extended beyond a single child. "Isabella," I could hear his gentle voice as I read, "it is my wish that my wealth, built from years of hard work and sacrifice, be shared equally among all my grandchildren. None shall go without." The words filled me with a flicker of hope, a fire igniting within me, brighter than all the candles I'd ever blown out on my birthday cake. I felt empowered, but that hope was rapidly weighed down by the realization that knowledge alone was not enough. This was merely a piece of paper in the eyes of my family, a document they would surely disregard while they continued to indulge in their lavish lifestyles. I needed a plan, a strategy that would ensure my grandfather's wishes were honored. The thought of approaching them, fueled by newfound determination, made my heart race with both hope and fear. What if they laugh? I wondered. What if they simply dismiss it again? The pit in my stomach twisted painfully as I contemplated the outcome. I could almost imagine their faces, the raised eyebrows, the barely concealed smirks. But then the image of my siblings staring down at me from their perch of prosperity floated across my mind, their contempt an inciting spark. Not anymore, I whispered to myself, feeling the fire within me shift into a raging inferno. I will not stand by and let you take what rightfully belongs to me. As the days turned into an endless cycle of quiet preparation, my resolve only cemented. I prepared mentally for the confrontation as if gearing up for battle. I practiced in the mirror, pacing back and forth like a soldier, rehearsing my lines until they felt like second nature. I found the letter, I would say, trying to sound both calm and assertive. It outlines my grandfather's wishes for our inheritance. Each time I visualized their reactions, the wide-eyed shock, the disbelief. Would they scramble to dismiss it as a forgery, or would they laugh in my face, retaliate with their sharp tongues? I knew I needed proof that would hold historical weight, and perhaps a dose of courage would be enough to rally me. But first, I had to bide my time and seize the right moment. My parents often hosted dinners at their home, gatherings filled with food and the hollow exchanges of pleasantries masquerading as love. I had been dreading the upcoming dinner. Everyone would be there, ready to showcase their new acquisitions. But instead of allowing their ostentation to dissuade me, I vowed to arm myself with my newfound knowledge. The day arrived, and I donned my most professional attire, convinced that entering with confidence would set the tone. I arrived at my parents' house, the familiar sight of their well-manicured lawn greeting me outright. As I stepped inside, the warm, sweet aromas of familiar dishes filled the air, secreting memories of my childhood into my senses. I fought against the swell of nostalgia, fighting against tears that threatened to spill. Isabella, you made it. My sibling's voice cut through the ambience as I entered the dining room, the laughter ringing out like an ominous bell. I had hoped to stand strong but faltered. My sibling was draped effortlessly in luxe fabrics, engulfed in a ceaseless chatter about a recent trip to some faraway coast. I wanted to snarl, to retaliate against their dismissive glances, but I tucked it away, focusing on the plan I had forged. As the evening progressed, I listened, my heart thumping wildly as they paraded their achievements, their laughter spilling like fine wine across the table. Every extravagant story only reminded me of my place in this world, a place they had created without me. When the final course was served, I knew it was time. Can I have everyone's attention? My voice quivered, but I forged onwards, grabbing onto my resolve. The laughter dulled slightly, but skepticism hung thick in the air. I found something important, I continued, heart racing as I held the letter aloft. This letter from our grandfather, he wanted his inheritance divided fairly among us all. Silence enveloped the room, the disbelief palpable. My siblings' brows knitted into a frown, incredulous. My parents exchanged glances filled with uncertainty, mixing fear and anger. You can't be serious, my siblings sneered, the facade of camaraderie cracking. That doesn't even make sense. Please, I implored, desperation bleeding into my voice. He said we should share it equally. Why should I be pushed aside just because you got lucky? My heart raced like a mad beast, but I pressed on as the tension dripped like sweat from my brow. I complied because I believed that family meant something. There was a tremor in my voice as I gestured to the letter, ready for the confrontation that would cement the battle where my heart felt most diminished. This is my proof. I will not let you take away my rights. The visage of my sibling morphed into one of something akin to rage, and I felt my stomach tumble. They opened their mouth, words still lodged, threatening to tip me into a void of insecurity. Each moment felt endless, the air oppressive as they searched for the exact phrase to counter my claim. They were preparing to launch an attack that would tear me apart yet again, but instead I braced myself, standing taller than I ever had. It was no longer sufficient that I simply held this knowledge close. It had become a part of me. I felt a rising tide of defiance swelling within me, both righteous and demanding, a tempest that foreshadowed a reckoning. This fire wasn't merely a flicker, it was a beacon, a call to arms against everything that had been stolen from me, everything that I deserved. And in that moment, standing before my family with my grandfather's wishes gripped in my hand, I was no longer invisible. I was ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I sat in the dimly lit room, the air heavy with the scent of wood polish and antique dust, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. I could almost hear the ancestral whispers echoing off the dark oak paneling. This was my family's estate, a house filled with memories that felt increasingly distant, like shadows slipping through my fingers. I shifted in my seat next to the lawyer, my palms damp against the cool leather of the armrests. The ticking clock on the wall seemed to mock me, each second yearning to drag on forever, amplifying the knot in my stomach. Today was the day everything changed. As I glanced around the room, I couldn't help but notice the gleam of polished surfaces and the soft glimmer of silverware set aside for dinner that would never happen again for our grandfather, and maybe, just maybe, dinner that would feel a bit more like a victory feast for me. My parents sat stiffly on the other side, their expressions a twisted mixture of expectation and dread. I tried not to let their worry seep into me. Instead, I focused on the lawyer beside me, a steady presence whose calm demeanor grounded me through the fray of what lay ahead. Everything is in order, he whispered as if sensing my anxiety. His eyes, sharp as they scanned the room like a watchful hawk, flickered toward the strategy I had meticulously crafted. Just remember, the truth is on your side. I nodded, though my throat felt dry as sandpaper at the thought of what was to come. The door creaked open, and in walked the executor of the estate, a man I barely knew but who seemed to command respect with a simple nod of his head. Behind him followed my sibling, looking as polished as ever, a facade that cloaked nerves with a veneer of confidence. There they sat, dressed like royalty, jewels and fine fabric glinting dangerously under the overhead lights. Their self-assuredness made my skin crawl, but I pushed it aside. I had come too far to let that affect me now. Thank you all for being here, the executor began, his voice smooth and even, floating through the room like a gentle breeze in an otherwise stifling situation. We are gathered to read the last will and testament of Mr. Bennet. His gaze flicked to me momentarily, an acknowledgement of my presence. He wished to ensure all family interests were considered in his final arrangements. My heart raced at those words. This was it, this was the moment I had been waiting for. I could almost hear my grandfather's voice in my head, wise and steady, reminding me that family values stem from honesty and equality. All those nights spent cramming details into that file, each piece of evidence meticulously collected to underscore my place in this family, now brought me here. The executor cleared his throat, and I leaned in, every muscle in my body tense with anticipation. To my beloved children, he began, and my parents leaned forward, faces expectant, eyes glistening with hopes and dreams. I leave the following, his voice floated through the air as he read, but my thoughts swirled in a chaotic dance. I was balanced on a tightrope, one foot over the edge, the leap seeming both terrifying and liberating. I could almost taste the freedom that would follow once the truth was unveiled, and I steeled myself against the rush of emotions that threatened to spill over. Suddenly, I felt the weight of the file in my lap, its contents brimming with secrets and forged documents, the evidence I needed to assert my rightful claim. If my family realized the lengths I had gone to protect my share, it would slice through the thick tension like a blade. I reminded myself of all the late nights, poring over bank statements, tracing shadows through old family records, and making strategic calls. Every small act was now lined up, ready to fall into place, all leading toward this pivotal moment. And now, to ensure fairness, the executor continued, his voice carrying an assurance that bounced off the walls and vivified my resolve, the estate shall be divided equally among all beneficiaries. The walls of the room felt as though they were closing in around my parents, their faces draining of color as the words settled in. What? My sibling gasped, the smug confidence etched upon their features suddenly shattered. Their mouth gaped open, disbelief written all over their face. What do you mean equally? That's not how it was supposed to be. I could hardly keep the smile at bay. But it's what grandfather wanted, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady, a mixture of triumph and disbelief at the reality we were unfolding. It felt like the first few drops of rain after a long drought, but this rain would wash away the dirt of deceit. My sibling's eyes narrowed at me, the fangs of shock quickly curving into something resembling anger. You did something, didn't you? There was a desperate undertone to their accusation, and for a moment I reveled in their suspicion, basking in the attention. Let's just say I did my homework, I stated flatly, no apology in my voice. You thought you could take everything for yourself, you thought I would just sit back and watch. Isabella, you don't even know what you're doing, my parent interjected, their voice like ice. Their distress hung thick in the air, a sharp contrast to the simmering satisfaction pooling in my chest. Your grandfather wouldn't want this, he loved you both. No, this is what he wanted, I asserted, feeling the strength in my resolve surge. He wanted fairness, he wanted honesty, and if truth means dividing this estate equally, then so be it. The room was silent except for the quiet ticking of that incessant clock, time swelling as the tension thickened around us. My siblings stood, their chairs scraping loudly against the floor, almost echoing the uncertainty in their heart. You think you can just waltz in here with your lawyer and claim what was never yours? You really will regret this, just wait. Regret? I challenged, standing up to face them for the first time, my heart racing and my voice firm. Regret is what you should feel, trying to manipulate everything behind the scenes while pretending to be the favorite. Stop it, my parent burst out, the raw emotions unraveling every thread of polite facades they had draped over us. Anxiety dripped from their brow like molten wax. This family has enough to deal with, we don't need your hostility. Hostility? I shook my head, a slight smile creeping up on my lips. Isn't it a little late for that? You both thought you could ignore my place in this family. Well, I'm here now and I'm not going anywhere. With a gaping mouth, my siblings seemed to be searching for a proper retort, their mind racing for something to grip onto in this swirling storm of my confrontation. But the truth was they had lost their advantage and the darkness of their schemes was being pulled into the light. The executor, standing on the sidelines, raised a hand to still the escalated emotions. Now everyone, let's take a moment. This is not the time for accusations or anger, we must honor the wishes of the deceased. Honor him, I shot back, expression unyielding, or honor your own greed? My siblings shook their head, anger flickering in their eyes. You won't be able to keep this, I promise I will fight you, this is war for what I deserve. War, I echoed, incredulous. You think this is a game? It might be for you, but I am not backpedaling now, not with evidence and intentions like mine. In their cowardly fury, an acrid silence encased my sibling like a biting frost, their pride beginning to wane. I could sense their confusion, their arrogance faltering in the face of calculated strategy I had wielded like a weapon. This isn't over, they hissed, glancing back at our parents, seeking their support. You'll regret your actions, just wait, the truth will come to light. As they stormed out of the room, venom dripping from their words, I felt a mixture of elation and heaviness settle over me. I could not deny that the confrontation had rattled me, but for the first time I sat strong in my truth. The executor cleared his throat once again, returning attention to me. We will need to finalize things, but this is just the beginning, Isabella. Trust that today marks a new chapter. Trust, I echoed, now standing a little taller, a little bolder. Cradling the file in my hands, I felt the tide shift beneath me, the ground solidifying underfoot. Today had marked the beginning of my journey, the unraveling of not just family lies, but the awakening of strength I never knew I possessed. As I glanced at my parents, their expressions caught between dismay and acceptance, I knew that my battle was not just for possessions but for the very integrity of our family ties. And in that moment, as the clock continued its rhythmic ticking, I knew I would fight to the end, for what was mine and ultimately for what was right. The chill of the conference room still lingered in the air, making me shiver slightly. I had reckoned that even the stale scent of polished oak and conservation-grade leather could not eclipse the exhilaration coursing through me. It was a weighty moment, the will reading marking not just the death of my grandfather but the dying flame of quiet injustice that had smoldered within me for years. My heart pounded a rhythmic beat in my chest, resonating with each word I had spoken, words that seemed to hang in the air with a newfound authority as I watched the reactions of my parents unfold before me. My father's mouth had gaped slightly, eyes wide as if he had never truly considered the possibility of my rightful claim. This was a man who had mastered the art of denial, particularly when it suited his narrative, and yet here I stood shattering that delusion. You cannot erase me from this family, and no amount of favoritism can diminish my rightful place, I had declared, my voice steady and firm. I could practically taste the bitter tang of victory on my tongue, savoring it as if it were the finest wine. Behind me, my siblings slumped in their chair, the weight of confusion and disbelief evident on their face. I could see the flush of anger rising in their cheeks as they processed the disarray of their previously secure world, and a small smile crept across my lips. I could feel the edges of my lips curving, but I swiftly composed myself, unwilling to allow arrogance to poison the moment. I had never envisioned myself as the kind of person who thrived on animosity or betrayal, but they had left me no choice, their preferential treatment wrapping around them like a thick veil through our childhood. No more. No longer could they dictate the terms of our family's love and legacy. I remained rooted to the spot, taking in my parents' pallid faces, torn between the suffocating tension that filled the room and the fierce independence I had just claimed. The air was thick, sharp, and electric, pulsing with the impending changes that had finally crashed over me like a wave. My fingers brushed against the smooth wood of the table, grounding me. You thought you could just take everything, didn't you? That I would simply fade into the background? Their expressions were a tapestry of regret and denial. I had worked so hard to erase their voices from my mind, to distance myself from their disdain, but somehow those moments replayed like a movie reel in my head. The forgotten birthdays, the insults veiled as jokes, the passive-aggressive remarks threaded through every family dinner. I was done being their shadow. My mother's eyes glimmered with sadness, but I was not moved. This was the woman who had dismissed my dreams as frivolous and unworthy. Isabella, she started, a hint of quaver in her voice, but I cut her off, unable to bear her feigned sympathy. Just don't, I said, my tone sharp as a knife. This isn't about loving me or not, it's about my rightful claim. I have as much right to this family legacy as anyone else. I drew in a deep breath, willing myself to maintain the control that had characterized my response thus far. I'm taking my place at the table, fingers curled against my palms, reminding me of how far I had come. I was no longer the little girl who needed validation from them. I had blossomed into a strong woman ready to wage war against the discrimination of the past. I could almost feel my grandfather's spirit flickering around, a lighthouse guiding me through this turbulent sea of familial chaos. His principles of fairness were burning bright within me, propelling me forward. My sibling finally found their voice, albeit weak and wavering. This isn't fair, Isabella. The words echoed in the chamber of betrayal and loss, but I merely shrugged, the weight of their angst rolling off my back like water on a duck. Fair, I scoffed. You made your peace with the notion of fairness a long time ago. I was always little Isabella, lost in your shadow while you reveled in the favor of our parents. A flicker of anger ignited in their eyes, and I relished it. This was a dance I had orchestrated, and I was finally discovering the rhythm of my power. How could you do this? They pressed, anger heightening their voice, but as I glanced at the stunned faces of my parents behind them, I felt that familiar swell of defiance. I didn't do anything that was not rightfully mine. You simply lost sight of your greed. What about family? My siblings shot back, their voice cracking, and that was all I needed. That question lingered in the air like a gaping void begging to be filled. Family? I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that reverberated through the room. Family built on favoritism, on neglecting everything that stood in the way of your penchant for being the golden child? I took a deep breath, wishing I could siphon the rising tide of emotions threatening to overflow. You shut me out, but now I am reclaiming what you thought was yours by birthright. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each second bouncing off the walls like a reminder of the fleeting nature of time, a ruthless taskmaster that kept us all behind the clock. I could feel my heart quickening, anticipation vibrating through the air. Every silent moment was a test, each struggle pulling lines further between us and amplifying my resolve. "You will regret this," my father eventually said, his face taut, jaw clenched. His voice held a harshness I had rarely heard, and I felt a fleeting moment of doubt. But then I remembered the years of emotional whiplash I had endured, begging for crumbs of affection, wondering if the day would ever come when I would be seen. "I will not. I am finally taking this family back into my own hands," I replied softly but firmly, the intensity in my gaze unwavering. "I will take what is mine and do what is right. Regret is a ghost I am leaving behind." I felt the intensity of their scrutiny as I turned away, making my way toward the door, feeling the weight of liberation clutch at my heart. Out there in the wild expanse beyond these suffocating walls lay the promise of new beginnings, the prospect of independence mingling with the heat of certainty. As I placed my hand on the cold metal doorknob, an invigorating thrill shot through me. I wasn't just walking away, I was stepping into a future of my own design. The world outside felt alive and vibrant, contrasting with the lingering gloom of the conference room behind me. The air, cool against my skin, echoed with the invisibility I had shed. I had finally silenced the whispering ghosts of doubt, allowing myself to believe in my worth, carving a space where I alone belonged. My breath came in steady pulses, invigorated by a sense of freedom that coursed through my veins. As I crossed the threshold into the wider world, I could have sworn I heard my grandfather's voice echoing through the air. "Proud of you," it seemed to say, threading through the whispering winds, wrapping around my heart like a silken sheet, the warmth of his love softening the edges of the storm I had endured. I had fought my battle and emerged victorious, and I knew this was only the beginning. The money would serve as a launch pad, a token of acknowledgement, but the true currency of my empowerment lay deeper within. I had taken a stand and would no longer allow myself to be erased. My name would be spoken boldly, engraved into the family's legacy, and they would have to reconcile with the truth I now represented. And as I stepped forward, leaving the shadows behind, I embraced the exhilarating unknown that awaited me with my newly acquired funds. I moved out of the shadow of my family in both a physical and emotional sense. The sun broke through the clouds as I stood in front of the small storefront I had rented. The faded brick building was an old bakery, the sign swaying gently in the morning breeze, its letters painted in a cheerful font announcing sweet beginnings to the world. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of possibility that hung in the air. This place felt like a second chance, a canvas waiting for me to paint my dreams. I was determined to build my own life, far removed from the grip of their favoritism and manipulation. "This is it," I whispered to myself, the words filled with both excitement and dread. As I entered the bakery, the wooden floor creaked in a way that felt oddly comforting, reminding me of being back in my grandmother's kitchen. The memories washed over me, intermingling with the new visions I had for this space. The walls needed a fresh coat of paint, and the display case would stand tall, filled with pastries that I had spent countless hours perfecting. "I can do this," I said into the empty room, my voice reverberating off the bare walls. I spent the next few days transforming the space. I painted the walls a soft lavender, a color that felt warm and inviting. I arranged flowers in vintage jars I had scoured thrift stores for, placing them on the tables that I hoped would soon be filled with smiling customers. As I worked, I felt a new sense of purpose coursing through my veins. I invested in my dreams, starting a small business that I poured my heart into, a place where I could finally be acknowledged for my hard work and passions. One late afternoon, I was busy rolling dough when my phone buzzed on the counter. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked it up. It was a text from my brother. "Mom wants to know when you're coming home for dinner," it read. I dismissed it, shaking my head. It reminded me all too much of my family's expectations, their ways of trying to manipulate me into returning to their world. I couldn't go back to that. "Not anymore," I muttered under my breath. "Hey, Isabella," a cheerful voice called from the doorway. I looked up to see a friend from my past, someone who never judged me by my wealth but by my spirit. "I heard you opened a bakery. Can I help?" "I mean, I don't know how much I can do, but I can definitely knead dough." I laughed, the sound brightening my spirit. "You can do more than that. I would love the help. You can taste test all my recipes." As we laughed and chatted, the smell of fresh vanilla and sugar filled the air. I learned to surround myself with people who valued me for who I was rather than for the dollars I once lacked. Each soft chuckle and shared memory built a bridge, leading me away from the darkness of my past. The first week flew by in a whirlwind of flour and sugar, laughter and light. My bakery slowly transformed into a vibrant hub for the community. I began hosting small events, baking classes, open microphone nights for local musicians, and even charity bake sales. I felt alive in ways I hadn't known I could. The taste of justice was sweet, filling each moment with a sense of accomplishment. "I can finally breathe," I confided to my friend one warm afternoon as we set up for an event. "I feel like I've escaped a cage." "You have," she nodded earnestly. "You've built this amazing life, Isabella. Your family's loss is our gain." Her words resonated deeply with me, and I couldn't help but smile as I looked around, watching the community come together. As weeks turned into months, I watched my dreams rise and bloom. Business thrived, and I felt a powerful sense of autonomy. Each time I sold a cupcake or a loaf of artisan bread, it felt like a small victory. I even began experimenting with new recipes, incorporating flavors and techniques that told my story, flavors that were uniquely mine. I found joy in creating new things, tasting success on my own terms, yet amid the happiness, my family remained cold. Their relationships strained under the weight of their guilt and betrayal. I could see it clearly, the silent judgment lurking behind their carefully curated messages. When my brother visited one afternoon, his expression was hard to decipher. He lingered at the doorstep, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "So this is where you've been hiding all this time," he said, attempting a casual tone. "It great," I replied, trying to keep the brightness in my voice. "We have freshly baked goods every day." He didn't respond, instead studying the bakery's interior with a furrowed brow. "Mom wants you to come back for Thanksgiving. It's been too long," he stated reluctantly, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. "I have a life here. I'm building something important," I replied, my tone firm yet softening. "Thanksgiving is about family, but I have created my own now." "Is this your family now?" He gestured to the bakery's bustling atmosphere filled with laughter and joy. "Yes," I replied honestly, "they support me, not tear me down." The words hung heavy in the air, and he shifted uneasily, his gaze darting around. "I miss you, he finally said, his voice breaking slightly. That struck me. I missed him too, but the memories of our family's favoritism wrapped around us like a shroud, suffocating. How could I explain what I had gone through without sounding bitter? "I know," I softened, my defenses crumbling, "but everything is different now, you must understand." "Maybe we can work on this," he suggested hesitantly, like a fragile branch reaching out into a storm. "Maybe," I agreed, but my heart felt heavy with skepticism. "I need time to heal." The thought lingered as he eventually left, a mix of concern and longing on his face. As the seasons changed, I noticed how the hustle and bustle of my bakery began to feel more familiar, more like home. Each layer of frosting, every cookie picture perfect and topped with sparkling sprinkles, spoke volumes of the growth I had achieved. I could finally see the fruits of my labor manifesting not just in the baked goods I served, but in the satisfaction it brought me. I learned that my identity, shaped not by my family's expectations but by my own aspirations, was powerful. Every night as I closed my eyes, I recalled the long path that had brought me to this moment. The struggles, the pain, and the darkness all transformed into stepping stones, leading me to this place of independence and self-respect. "What they took from me will never define me," I whispered into the still night, and for the first time I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. Resting my hands on my large wooden counter, I gazed into the dimly lit bakery filled with the laughter of patrons enjoying my sweets. I could hear the clinking of coffee cups and the soft hum of conversation like a gentle lullaby. A rhythmic sense of belonging filled the space, something I thought I would never achieve. I grinned as I stood there with a sense of fulfillment soaring inside me. I had finally created something real, an oasis in the dryness of my past. And in that moment, I understood that true revenge was not about harboring the hatred my family had fueled. It was about embracing joy, crafting a life rich with love and acceptance. The shadows of my family's manipulations slowly faded away, making room for the vibrant light of my new beginning. I was not just a survivor, I was a creator of my own destiny, and in that truth lay my greatest strength.